I don't know how it's possible, but Speedroids made their way into top 32 out of German nationals. Don't make 30% of you that have not smashed the yellow crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so you guys don't miss out more Oz content. Top 32 out of German nationals here. Lampy put together data for this. So we have 10 Sprite decks in Top Cut for this. Wow, Sprite actually edging out ahead here. Most of the variants, from what I was reading, were the Evil Twin Sprite Unfun variants. So, you know, you can only imagine how that works. And then we had 9 Kashtira decks. Now, justice was served for this regional with Eradicator Epidemic Virus resolving for 5 cards out of the Duelist hand, and gosh, that was disgusting to watch. Labyrinth had 4 representation here, which once again, Labyrinth clutching a hold of that victory. I don't feel bad for Kashtira at all. I've seen so many people now calling for the immediate ban of Labyrinth because, you know, people are like, oh my gosh, Eradicator for 5, it's so ridiculous. They've been able to do that all format, and it's now suddenly a problem because you got to watch it on live stream. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. We also had 1 branded deck in Top Cut, which, I mean, that's... Branded's representations are looking a little bit low out here, big guy. We also had a Manadeum Duelist. Huh, Manadeum creeped in. Dragon Link decided it also wanted to show up. Dragon Link is one of my favorite decks in the current iteration of things when it decides it doesn't want to brick. If it's on a consistent run, it's good. We also had a Trap Tricks Duelist make it in the Top Cut, which is pretty good as well. And then, of course, 1 Vanquish Soul player. Vanquish Soul drug its way all the way up into top 8, so I think that that's pretty strong to see. We also had 1 Speedroid Duelist make their way into Top Cut. I have no idea how that was possible for that to happen, but you know what? They did it. And then a Blind Second Purely deck made Top Cut. Now, if you're expecting some crazy amount of deck lists here, we don't have a lot of them, but we at least have the Speedroid one to talk about. So we're going to pass on over to those deck lists. First deck list we're going to be looking at here was the top 4 Kashtira variant. Now, to be honest with you, Kashtira innovations aren't as crazy as you would think that they would be at this point in time, but you have to understand it kind of comes down to the defensive options and how you're going to build your deck. We've seen Book of Moon, Enemy Controller, Forbidden Lands. All of these cards have relevant spots at the dinner table here, and as you're seeing here, we are taking advantage of Enemy Controller in the main deck, and of course Book of Moon in the side deck as well for defense. And this card is just the nuts. Like, good stuff for this card. As build is playing Triple Pot of Prosperity. We have seen some builds in the TCG as of late pushing towards Pot of Desires with the Prosperity, so they're doing like a 2-3 split. This build opted not to. When I was looking at this list earlier, this feels massively optimized. Like, this is, we cut out the fat, we're playing like optimized ratio, especially you can tell down here in your X deck, where you're seeing double Dark Arm, the double Zeus, and then the double Big Eye. This Duelist, their game plan was pretty much intact, and they knew what they were planning to do here for a majority of the run. Outside of that, once again, Kashtira has been extremely streamlined at this point in time. If you're expecting some sort of like crazy left-hand thing, Desires has been about the spiciest thing that I've seen this deck try to play at this point in time, and there's not really much of a point of trying to push for it anymore. So good stuff. Next up here, we have Despia. It's very nice to see a Despia build that's not on some ridiculous amount of cards. This build is also not playing the Gimmick Puppet. That was something else that took me by surprise, because everybody's been like so crazy about, oh my gosh, you know, like we have to play the Gimmick Puppet. No, this Duelist opted for Jinzo here as like, you know, the little card to bring up and then punish the opponent. You don't always have to follow a lot of the norms that people feel established at this point. Now, we are playing the good old Crossout Designator here, and because we're playing Crossout, we get to make what we were going to call the funky card choice decisions here, which is we get to main deck 1 evenly, we get to main deck 1 Imperm here. At all points in time, you probably draw this Imperm, and then you're like, oh, sadness. Because I know I would. That's just my luck playing this deck. 1 Retribution, 1 Banishment is fine. We have the TC Booze down here. This card's pretty good in this deck. I'm not going to lie to you. Also, it's kind of a shame to see that there wasn't more branded representation, but I feel like once more and more people start to kind of figure out how to play against the deck just it doesn't have as strong of a matchup as you really think that it would. But good stuff to see this deck doing its thing. Once again, another extremely optimized list, I feel like, here. Also talking about Allure of Darkness was an extremely good card just for the ability to dig further into the deck and try to find, you know, more of those important resources to play the game. Next up here, we have our Vanquish Soul list. Now, remember, according to the data, there was only one of these that made their grind in. They're not playing TC Boo, which, to be honest with you, I guess is fine. You can tell that this build was more of like a control-ish variant here. They are playing the Doggeron here. This is actually pretty important because you need, you know, additional fire monsters at certain points to trigger, you know, good additional effects. And you get that here because you can just kaiju over your opponent's stuff. You might be like, you know, like 3K is like handing them that is an issue. No, not really. You can clean up aisle 9 with, you know, a majority of these monsters anyway. And then, of course, the thing that's been holding this deck together, I feel like, is the fact that Fenrir into the Rise Heart lets you make the super giant Rise Heart here. And the fact that a deck out of nowhere here can do, you know, piggyback off of, yeah, we're going to call it piggybacking. We're piggybacking off of Kashtira's boss monster here is, you know, pretty crazy. It's like, you thought it was Kashtira, but no, it was Mia Rise Heart all along. So that's actually something pretty interesting. I also see, like, some of the option trees down here in the extra deck are pretty interesting. Like, the inclusion of the Security Dragon. This was an absolute must. This deck needs to play Lingaribo. If this deck gets shut off from its extra deck, this deck is just going to look at itself and go, what am I supposed to do here? So this was very much needed. Outside of that, everything else here feels pretty standardized for what you'd expect. Next up here, oh boy, Evil Twin Runic Sprite. So this was the most represented variant out of a majority of the top cut. And I mean, we've talked about this. Why is that? Well, this is your good interruption engine / subdraw package. This is just to blow your opponent out of the water. This is your infinite resource draw package. And then this is the nice consistent backing that kind of brings it all together to make sure that, your opponent can't actually play the game. Now, this deck did have some interesting tech choices. Forbidden Droplet's not something that I'd seen this deck really consider, you know, wanting to play, but it can very easily do so because, I mean, just normal summon, trigger effect, they do something, chain Droplet, and then you're like, oh, cool, dodge. It's pretty decent. I see that this deck was also playing one Chaos Hunter, which is very interesting to also see pop up. And then, of course, this was for time. And they did cite an additional little sprite extension package here of the Jet and the Smashers. This is actually to make sure, you know, if they need to in certain matchups, be able to hit the extension line and go for it. And honestly, it worked out relatively well. Also glad to see Mannequin Cat getting a little bit more love down here. This card is stupid good for what it actually is. But outside of that, deck performed very beautifully out of the weekend in terms of overall standard representation. So, good stuff. And then out of top 32, we have, yeah, that's right. We're going to say it. We have Kashtira, Speedroid. Something like, I was trying to think it was just standard Speedroid. Well, okay, to be fair, these level 7s are free stepping stones, alright? They let you make Baron de Fleur down here. Like, I don't know if you know this or not, but Baron's an extremely good card. Alright, like, these guys right here are all just level 7s that you have good effects. Alright, their entire purpose is to facilitate additional things in the extra deck. I see that we're also playing Tetherwolf here as well. Been a little while since I've seen this guy come up, so that's actually pretty interesting. We are playing Enemy Controller for some defensive options as well. Don't underestimate this card. I've been saying, you know, don't underestimate X in a lot of these decks, but like, this card is pretty good. Outside of this for the Speedroid package, remember that you are playing Speedroids, and I don't mean that to like sound very, very like bad, but a lot of these decks' success rate has been, you know, due to these good cards being absolutely nuts. Like, if your opponent tries to do something and you do like the Fenrir, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can go ahead and, you know, get my free search off of this or something. It's kind of free real estate, and you can go ahead and attack out a problem card, and then you can do Speedroid plays along the way. So it is extremely nice to see that rogue options are performing. Even if, you know, somebody's going to be like, oh my gosh, it's still Kashtira. Yeah, it is, but decks need these consistent engines in order to do the thing. So what do you think? Please, leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later in the day, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.